приложишь, не приложишь, нет. живешь. Бабушка приходила. тоже иметь.
Ну ладно, не суть. Ну да.
До смертности как бы.
Ну, в моем случае. Требуешь исследования, требуешь... Ладно, ну значит нет. Значит, ну да, значит сегодня мы заточали.
Скоростные.
Вот это даже имеет в виду. Нет, еда нормально, овощи, еда нормально. А, это так думаю, что делать. Это может быть.
Уговорил просто.
Идеальное.
Грегор МакИтер. МакИтер, Карпидер, Амитер, говорит, шутка у тебя. Понимаешь.
Ну да, он там такая.
знаю, что там, ничего. Запретили ношение носков, носов. Что такое? Да, серьезно? Я выйду, и что, соседи? А, у меня тоже такая была, кстати, да, понимаю. Почему бы и да, почему бы нет? Ну, ну это ты делаешь. Да. Где плохо? Ну, не. Ну, да. Рублей это ура. Нет, что нет? Да нет, так это есть на самом деле. Ну ладно. Да наоборот, вот наоборот только да. Думаю, это нет. Ой, я думаю, немного. Да, вот это он и есть. Знаменная, да. Да, ну вот видишь, ну ладно, ну ладно. Идеально.
Tüte auf, heißes Wasser drauf und voila, fertig sind die Instant-Nudeln. Die kleine Revolution am Snackhebel. Sie sind lecker, preiswert und schnell zubereitet. Um mehr über das leckere Fastfood zu erfahren, schauen wir bei Wissen for Free heute nach Japan. Dort wurden die sogenannten Ramen nämlich erfunden. Ein Japaner verzehrt übrigens im Schnitt mehr als 40 Packungen pro Jahr. Und weltweit werden sogar über 100 Milliarden Packungen jährlich konsumiert. Doch woher kommt eigentlich der Hype um die japanische Nudelsuppe? Entwickelt wurden die Instant-Nudeln als Produkt der Nachkriegszeit in Japan. Nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg litten viele Einwohner Hunger und die Warteschlangen vor den Essensständen waren oft sehr lange. Momofuku Ando nahm dies zum Anlass, um ein Produkt zu schaffen, das lange haltbar und zudem jederzeit verfügbar ist. Und so vermarktete seine Firma Nissin Foods 1958 erstmals Instant-Nudeln unter dem Namen Chicken-Ramen. 13 Jahre später brachte Nissin dann die Cup-Noodles auf den Markt, das erste Nudelprodukt im Becher. Mittlerweile kennt man das Fertiggericht weltweit unter vielen verschiedenen Markennamen. Die Bechernudeln werden als vorgekochter und getrockneter Nudelblock mit Gewürzpulver und Öl, das sich oft in einer separaten Packung befindet, verkauft. Und so geht's. Die Aromapäckchen zu dem getrockneten Nudelblock geben, mit kochendem Wasser übergießen und ca. 2 Minuten einweichen lassen. Danach kann direkt aus dem Becher gegessen werden. Die Hauptzutaten für die getrockneten Nudeln sind Weizenmehl, Palmöl und Salz. Der getrocknete Nudelblock wurde dabei ursprünglich durch Frittieren gekochter Nudeln hergestellt. Diese Methode wird in asiatischen Ländern immer noch am häufigsten praktiziert. In westlichen Ländern hingegen werden sie meistens luftgetrocknet. Fun Fact: Ramen.
I would say out of all the things that I'm expert in, I think the number one thing is in fatigue. That's definitely a certification that you can't get from any university. You have to get it from the School of Hard Knocks. But I personally have been so tired for so many years and then overcame that fatigue and then helped tens of thousands of people. So I'm going to tell you right now, I am going to show you how to get your energy back. I was doing all the wrong things. I was trying to take all these pills and vitamins, but there was something else underneath my fatigue that I was missing. And until years later, when I finally figured it out, it was like I took a helmet off my head and I finally woke up. So let's talk about the 7 reasons why you're tired. The first reason is adrenal fatigue. You have too much cortisol. What's interesting about cortisol, it's a stress hormone that adapts your body to stress. And under stress, your body switches to running on glucose. Despite what your diet is, if you have too much stress, your body's going to basically run on glucose. This is why there's another name for cortisol. Glucocorticoid. Okay, it's a glucocorticoid. It's a glucose type hormone meant for short-term energy. It's supposed to give you energy, but it ends up making you tired because it's going to mobilize a lot of glucose that's stored in your liver, and it's also going to make glucose out of protein and fat. It's called gluconeogenesis. So here you are having all this glucose flowing through your bloodstream, and then your blood sugar is going to increase, and then insulin's going to come in there and push it down. So when you go through chronic stress, that's when things start to go downhill, and all that glucose will just make you thoroughly exhausted. All right, so the more stress you have, the more your body runs on sugar. Now, there's a little gland in the brain called amygdala, and it's very similar to the adrenal glands on top of the kidney, but it works on your brain. In other words, it addresses a certain type of stress in your brain. And that specific stress is a fear type stress. It's a fear response. So amygdala has everything to do with different shades of fear. Whether it's a very high level fear like you're shy, to a major panic attack, or you're terrified, or right in the middle you have anxiety or you have worry. All those are fear states. And so anytime you have a fear state, the amygdala is involved, and it's going to affect a lot of different biological processes, like your ability to sleep, like your ability to get into a calm state. And anything that's related to fear is going to get you to avoid that fear. You probably heard of the saying, you must face your fears, right? Well, when you face your fears, they no longer are fears, because fear is about avoiding something. And as soon as you don't avoid it and you face it, you don't have it anymore. But the best remedies for an adrenal stress situation or an overactive amygdala would be to take vitamin B1, okay? Good amounts of B1 in the form of nutritional yeast. That is going to make you feel very calm. Now, some other things you can do is take ashwagandha. I have some more information on that in a link down below. But ashwagandha is an adaptogen. It increases your tolerance to stress. There's many other herbs that are adaptogens, but ashwagandha is one of the top herbs. And then we have sleep. More sleep, better control over your stress, better adrenal function. And I will get to sleep in a second. But the last thing I want to mention is physical work. And more ashwagandha. That is going to make you feel very calm. Or and you face it to get you to avoid that fear. You probably heard the saying, you must face your fears, right? Well, when you face your fears, they no longer are fears, because fear is about avoiding something. And as soon as you don't avoid it and you face it, you don't have it anymore. But the best remedies for an adrenal stress situation or an overactive amygdala would be to take vitamin B1, okay? Good amounts of B1 in the form of nutritional yeast. That is going to make you feel very calm. Now, some other things you can do is take ashwagandha, vitamin B1, okay? Good amounts of B1 in the form of nutritional yeast. That is going to make you feel very calm. Now, some other things you can do is take ashwagandha. I have some more information on that and a link down below. But ashwagandha is an adaptogen. It increases your
Прах. Юрики, ели мои юрики. Ирландия.
your tolerance to stress. There's many other herbs ashwagandha can do is take ashwagandha. I have some more information on that and a link down below. But ashwagandha is an adaptogen. It increases your tolerance to stress. There's many other herbs that are adaptogens, but ashwagandha is one of the top herbs. And then we have sleep. More sleep, better control over your stress, better adrenal function. And I will get to sleep in a second. But the last thing I want to mention is physical work. That's a very great therapy for stress. Like any physical work that you can start doing, it will really help you release that stress. Now, exercise is okay, but physical work is a lot better because physical work and also exercise helps to deplete that stress energy that tends to build up that prevents you from sleeping. All right, number 2, sleep, okay? Poor sleep will make you tired. And many times you can't sleep because you have high cortisol because you're stressed, especially if it's between 12 midnight and 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. That is when you're supposed to have the lowest amount of cortisol. But if your adrenals are overactive, that's the time that you're most awake. And I had a problem with that for years until I figured things out. Now, one thing about sleep, there's a sleep hormone called melatonin. I recently did a very interesting video on melatonin because there's 2 types of melatonin. There's one type that's in your bloodstream and in the pineal gland, but there's another type of melatonin that is in all of your cells. It's deep in the cells. It's called a subcellular melatonin. And the way that you increase that melatonin is through infrared. Did you realize that over 50% of the sun rays are infrared? So that infrared is actually increasing melatonin in all of your body's cells, which will greatly help your sleep. But another purpose of melatonin is to act as a powerful antioxidant, even more powerful than glutathione in your liver. And so melatonin is really important in countering all the stress that we experience and preventing a lot of oxidative damage and free radical damage. And so if you can get out in the sun, definitely do that for a good period of time. But if it's winter and you can't do that, you can also get infrared from a fireplace or a campfire or some candles or red light therapy. But the sensation of infrared is like the heat that you feel from the sun or from a fire or from a light, like incandescent light. I'm not talking about the artificial lights that they have now, like from your computer and your cell phone, which will all counter the infrared wavelength and deplete your melatonin. So that's probably one of the reasons why people have a hard time sleeping, is they're sitting in front of a computer all day long and they can't seem to recharge the melatonin. Now, the other thing I'm going to recommend for sleep, which is a really great protocol, which I use on my body, is I take 4 of my sleep aid, okay, right before bed, about 20 minutes, and 3 of my D3 and K2. That seems to work very effectively to get into a really nice deep delta wave sleep, and it's allowed me to get like even up to 9 hours of sleep. So I will use that when I need to sleep a little bit longer, but presently my sleep cycles are in pretty good shape. Vitamin D3 helps sleep to wavelength and depletes your melatonin. So, but if it's winter and you can't do that, you can also get infrared from a fireplace or a campfire or some candles or red light therapy. But the sensation of infrared is like the heat that you feel from the sun or from a fire or from a light, like incandescent light. I'm not talking about the artificial lights that they have now, like from your computer and your cell phone, which will all counter the infrared wavelength and deplete your melatonin. So that's probably one of the reasons why people have a hard time sleeping, is they're sitting in front of a computer all day long and they can't seem to recharge the melatonin. Now, the other thing I'm going to recommend for sleep, which is a really great protocol, which I use on my body, is I take 4 of my sleep aid, okay, right before bed, about 20 minutes, and 3 of my D3 and K2, okay. I use on my body is I take 4 of my sleep aid, okay, right before bed, about 20 minutes, and 3 of my D3 and K2. That seems to work very effectively to get into a really nice deep delta wave sleep, and it's allowed me to get like even up to 9 hours of sleep. So I will use that when I need to sleep a little bit longer, but presently my sleep cycles are in pretty good shape. Vitamin D3 helps to reset the sleep centers. It's great for jet lag, and it's very, very important in sleep cycles. And so taking vitamin D right before you go to bed is actually going to help you sleep. It's not going to wake you up. All right, number 3, post-viral syndrome, okay? So let's just say you just had COVID or some type of viral flu, and now you have this residual fatigue. You have chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, the medical term for this is called myalgic encephalomyelitis. Now, what does that mean? That's a fancy term for you have a combination of muscle pain and inflammation and soreness with inflammation of your brain causing cognitive deficits as well as fatigue. Now, that medical condition mimics the symptoms of a B1 deficiency as well as a B3 deficiency. So really what I think is going on is you have this inflammatory immune response, and it's creating massive oxidation, massive free radical damage. And you're going into this infection with an already empty bucket of B vitamins. And the residual fatigue that you have from this infection is really a vitamin deficiency. That's what it is. Primarily vitamin B1, but also the other B vitamins, as well as other nutrients as well. And so if you just had an infection and you start taking nutritional yeast and or B1, try to find a natural source, and you also took vitamin D3 with zinc, okay, you're going to start to have more energy. There's some other things that you can take too as powerful antioxidants like NAC, and not taking a melatonin but being exposed to the infrared, which naturally increases melatonin, which I already mentioned is a very powerful antioxidant. probably even more powerful than glutathione. Now, the other point I want to bring up about viruses is that when you have existing viruses that are dormant in your body, they're called latent viruses. Okay? So you had an infection, let's say in high school, like Epstein-Barr virus, and then 20 years later, it comes out of remission. It usually comes out of remission when you experience stress, because cortisol is an immune suppressive hormone. So it actually lowers your immune system. This is why a lot of people are on prednisone for all sorts of infections, because it gets rid of the symptoms. But what it's really doing, it's wiping out the inflammation, but it's also wiping out the entire immune response. So when you have high levels of cortisol, your immune system temporarily goes to sleep, and the door opens up for these viruses to come out and kick you when you're down. So if you have any type of post-viral symptoms, whether it's fatigue or whatever, do whatever you can to find the cause of your stress and try to get rid of it, because it's going to be really hard to get rid of that fatigue if you still have this stress situation that's unresolved. And unfortunately, losses can be a part of that as well. It's called bereavement. When you go through losses, the cortisol increases, the stress increases, and the viruses can come out and create all sorts of problems as well. So in that case, if you have that situation, definitely follow the things that I'm talking about: getting more sleep, getting more nutrition, getting IR, taking certain nutrients, etc. All right. Another cause of fatigue is having Lyme disease, and that comes from a spirochete, which is a type of bacteria that can go in your body and create an immune reaction. All the symptoms from Lyme are actually coming from your own immune system trying to kill off this microbe, but it can't find it. So I recommend doing a natural type antibiotic, and that would be something like oregano, garlic, thyme, sage, things that are natural that can help boost your immune system, but without the side effects. Number 5, insulin resistance, okay? If you're on a high-carb diet, realize that your garlic immune system trying to kill off this microbe, sorts of problems as well. So in that case, if you have that situation, definitely follow the things that I'm talking about: getting more sleep, getting more nutrition, getting IR, taking certain nutrients, etc. All right. Another cause of fatigue is having Lyme disease, and that comes from a spirochete, which is a type of bacteria that can go in your body and create an immune reaction. All the symptoms from Lyme are actually coming from your own immune system trying to kill off this microbe, but it can't find it. So I recommend doing a natural type antibiotic, and that would be something like oregano, garlic, thyme, sage, things that are natural that can help boost your immune system, but without the side effects. Number 5, insulin resistance, okay? If you're on a high-carb diet, realize that your brain is going to be slightly more unconscious, because that's what carbs do. They make your brain go to sleep. So you're going to definitely need a nap after you eat. When you go on a low-carb diet, it actually wakes up your brain. You actually become more conscious. You are running your brain on ketones, which is a preferred fuel. And so if you haven't already gone on a ketogenic diet with intermittent fasting, that could create the biggest effect on your energy more than anything. And I did put a link down below for those of you that are new to that topic. All right, number 6, low stomach acids. If you don't have stomach acid, especially if as you get older and you lose the acidity in your stomach, you're not going to be able to absorb B12. You're not going to be able to absorb iron too well. Both of those conditions can cause anemia. You're not going to be able to break down protein too well. That can cause fatigue. You're going to be more susceptible to getting SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That can make you tired. Not to mention all the digestive problems that you're going to have. Those can make you tired as well. And the simple remedy is a combination of apple cider vinegar and betaine hydrochloride. But just realize that you need to take a lot of it in the beginning. You may need to take 5 to 6 to 7 tablets right before you eat for some weeks before you really start to turn things around, because betaine hydrochloride is not a very concentrated amount of hydrochloric acid. It's a very weak type of acid that takes a while to build up. All right, and the last point I'm going to bring up is vitamin deficiencies. That can create fatigue. It's not as common, but it can create fatigue. And I just mentioned the B12, I just mentioned the iron, but I didn't mention potassium. In all of your cells, you have a sodium-potassium pump that generates electrical energy for your cells. So you need a lot of potassium to generate that energy. It's very easy to get sodium, but it's more difficult to get potassium. And the way you get that is through large amounts of salads. That's right. That can give you a lot of energy. So that's something, if you haven't done before, you might want to start increasing more salad to increase more potassium, as well as the next mineral, which is also involved in energy and ATP, which is magnesium. So you can get a lot of magnesium and potassium from having large salads. I notice on the days that I don't have a big salad, I'm a little more tired. Now, out of all the things you can do, the most important thing is to get your diet straightened out. I didn't know that in the past. And so I was trying to take all these vitamins and do all these different things on top of eating too many carbs. It never worked. So you need to get on keto and do intermittent fasting as a priority. Number 2, you want to work on your stress so you can then sleep. That's number 2, because they are connected. And then number 3, many times there could be some underlying residue from some post-infection, or you have this latent virus that's coming out of remission, in which case you need to take more B1, D3, zinc, and some of the other things that I recommend. All right, if you have not seen my video on melatonin, very important video, check it out right here.
Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. I am Alicia, your host, and today we are going to talk all about dynamics. It's been brought to my attention that I haven't had a dedicated video about dynamics, so I figured that today's the day. I'm going to live it up, we're going to talk about dynamics, and it'll be fun, I hope. What we're going to do in today's video is talk about what dynamics are, the basics, so even if you're just starting out, you'll be able to follow this video. I want to talk about dynamics across different musical eras, because the way you play dynamics changes depending if you're playing a Baroque piece or a modern piece, so we're going to touch on that. And then I'm going to give you some tips for being able to play dynamics effectively. Now, as far as I know, there's no like, implement this special tip and then 5 minutes later you have great dynamics forever. I haven't come across anything like that. If you have like an insider tip that is gonna be amazing like that, just like please let me and everyone else know. That would be great. So this video isn't gonna be like, you know, instantly become amazing at dynamics, but I'm hoping that it'll give you some ideas of things that you can do in your practice to slowly over the course of time improve your ability to play dynamics. Anyway, let's get started. I really wanted to share this question that Virgil asked about dynamics, since it's the basis of the entire video and likely something many of you guys can relate to, including myself. So here it is. I'm an adult beginner who just started of March this year. Wow, that's pretty recent. And so this would have been in 2018 still, but I digress. And currently my piano teacher is gearing me towards ABRSM grade 3. As per subject, I'm currently having a little hiccup with dynamics as I tend to either play too hard or soft, and I frequently receive comments from my teacher about abrupt crescendos. I'm still developing my dynamic ear since I'm new to the piano, so I come to your YouTube channel to find some pointers and tips to get some enlightenment, but alas, none could be found. Or maybe I missed it. No, I don't actually think, except for like little bits and pieces and videos here and there, I haven't done a dedicated video. So anyway, that's what this is. A video focused around dynamics and how to practice dynamics. Before we get into the how of playing dynamics, let's talk about the what. What are dynamics? Well, dynamics are just symbols that represent volume. We have symbols like P, which stands for piano, that tells us to play quietly. We have these V-shaped lines telling us to get louder and to get quieter. Those are crescendos and decrescendos, and etc. What you see here on the screen are the basic dynamic markings you're going to be running into. Basically everything all the way from really, really soft to really, really loud. Although pianissimo and fortissimo are pretty uncommon. You won't come across them very much. If you're playing piano music that has like a P over here and then later on it has an F, like so quiet and loud, that's going to be indicating that you want to do an abrupt change. You're basically going from quiet to loud with little to no transition. Now, if you're playing a piece of music that has, say, a P followed by a crescendo, and then maybe finished with a forte or a mezzo forte or something like that, it's telling you that you're going to go from quiet to loud gradually, note by note. Sometimes crescendos and diminuendos last for just a measure, sometimes they last for many measures, but the idea is the same. You want to like gradually change your volume. So that's the what of dynamics. And before we talk tips and techniques and stuff like that, I want to talk about the different eras and how you'll apply dynamics in say Bach and Baroque music versus Chopin and Romantic music and so on. In the Baroque period between about 1600 and 1750, pianos as we know them today didn't exist. When people wrote and played keyboard music, it was usually on a harpsichord or clavichord, and organs were another popular keyboard as well. The harpsichord and clavichord just didn't have much capacity for dynamic expression, which is why dynamics written for Baroque music is so different. In Baroque music, you'll see terraced dynamics, which just means abrupt dynamic changes. You'll go from piano to mezzo piano with little transition, or you'll have even more dramatic changes like piano to forte. These sudden changes in volume were what keyboard instruments were capable of doing back in the day. They weren't really able to do anything more subtle. And this is important to keep in mind when you're playing music from this time period. In the classical period, between about 1750 and 1825, pianos were being built, developed, and fine-tuned. So composers at the beginning of the classical era, such as Haydn, would write a lot of keyboard sonatas for harpsichord, per se. But towards the end of the era, classical composers such as Beethoven would write sonatas on a more modern sounding piano. The damper pedals on these early pianos were very different, but dynamically they became more similar to pianos of today. So that's why you'll see much more extreme dynamic ranges in classical piano sonatas. So Beethoven especially, for example, was fond of fortissimo or fortissimo. In the Romantic period, from about 1825 to 1900, pianos became the thing that we know and love today. They went through a huge development. Things like the damper pedal improved, the volume and expressive quality have improved, and this is the era where you really saw piano superstars begin to pop up, such as Liszt and Alkin. In this era, composers really started adding dynamic detail to their music. You'll see plenty of accents, sforzendos, and other touch markings with a wide range of dynamic contrasts, and plenty of crescendos and diminuendos. There also tends to be more detail with pedal markings, since this is when the piano had developed a modern style damper pedal. In the modern era, which is basically from 1900 to now-ish, dynamic markings are as variable as the era itself. You have early 20th century composers like Bartók who wrote these hyper-specific dynamics and articulations, basically leaving no note behind. And other similar composers would be guys like Kabalevsky, Shostakovich, etc. You had composers such as Debussy who insist on subtlety in their music, which is very, very different from the drama of the Romantic era. And then the kind of obscure sounding modernism era, and then like you have jazz, pop, blues, all of those styles. Beyond that. It's good to have a grip on which dynamic styles were common in which eras, just so you interpret them effectively. Because nothing's worse than a romantic sounding interpretation of Clair de Lune. Clair de Lune was an Impressionist era piece, and you really just like have to like light touches is so crucial in that piece. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard piano students play it with like the sweeping Liszt style grand gestures, just like totally not appropriate for that style of music. When it comes down to it, playing dynamics on the piano is really just a matter of how quickly and firmly you press down a key. Quicker and firmer means a louder note, whereas slower and softer equals a quieter note. One thing that I've noticed over the years of teaching is that people tend to lean in one direction volumely that's not a word. People tend to lean in one direction on the volume spectrum. So some people have a tendency to be quiet players just naturally, and some people have a tendency to be like heavy-handed, and that's the camp that I fall into. And it's good to have an idea of where on the spectrum you fall, because then you can work on your weakness. So since I tend to be like a very like clangy, heavy-handed player, I'm really into the fortes, but I'm not so good at the pianos, then that gives me a sense that that's like where I need to spend more time. I need to focus on finding nuance in the quieter volumes. So here's one of the biggest tips I can give you about playing dynamics on the piano. This is like a physical tip, and it's just as abstracted as it is tangible. You really just have to feel it to understand what I'm saying. Project dynamics with your arms and not just your fingers. If you use only your fingers to create the force or softness, the tone will always be a little thin. So for example, your fortes with just finger strength will sound a little harsh, and your pianos will sound a little weightless and